Hello, friends. Tonight, we wander into the warm, rowdy, and slightly sour-scented world of a medieval tavern. Not just a place to drink, but the beating heart of the village, the unofficial newsstand, and the only building where a noble, a peasant, and a wandering lute player could all get equally drunk and equally pickpocketed. Here, laughter, danger, and questionable stew all simmer beneath a creaky wooden roof. But before we step inside, take a deep breath. And if you truly enjoy these quiet journeys through time, you're welcome to subscribe and share where in the world you're joining us from. It's always a pleasure to hear. Now, turn down the lights. Let the hum of your fan settle into the background. And let's slip gently into the scene. You've been walking for hours, through damp streets scented with smoke, horse dung, and what may or may not be boiled cabbage. Your shoes are soaked, your cloak smells like yesterday, and you've narrowly avoided getting run over by a cart of root vegetables. You need shelter and something strong to drink. But in this town, there are no glowing signs to guide you, no street numbers, no painted menus, just your ears. You follow the sound. Past the forge, past a fish seller yelling about his eels, until you hear a raucous chorus, laughter, arguing, and someone bellowing a song about a goose. You find it. Leaning slightly to the left, like it's had one too many. A warped wooden structure with a cracked sign hanging above the door. It might be a picture of a mug, or a bear, or perhaps both. This is your stop. The step is sticky. The heavy door groans like it's trying to tell you something. And then you're inside. Warmth hits you first, then a wall of smells. Wood smoke, sweat, damp wool, and something meaty, though you're not sure from which animal or which year. The ceiling is low enough to make tall folks duck, and drunk folks forget to. The floor, dirt. Not just dirty, actual earth. Someone tossed down straw to keep up appearances. It doesn't help. There are no booths, no servers, and definitely no such thing as a quiet corner. This is a medieval tavern, and it only has two moods, loud and closed, because it caught fire. You spot a seat by the hearth. The bench is uneven and damp with something. You decide not to ask. To your left, someone is arguing about a stolen chicken. To your right, someone else is asleep, still gripping a ladle. Under the table, a one-eyed dog gnaws a bone like he pays rent here. And friend, this is just the entrance. The tavern door slams shut behind you. The darkness hugs your senses like a damp woolen blanket, warm, itchy, and faintly suspicious. Your eyes adjust. Candlelight flickers against soot-streaked walls, casting dancing shadows that make even the chairs seem ready for a fight. The hearth crackles in the corner, both a heat source and a fire hazard. A thin veil of smoke floats in the air, struggling to escape through a chimney that might be home to a very unlucky bird. But it's the smell that hits hardest. Not a scent, a feeling. A full-bodied blend of spilled ale, unwashed humanity, mildewed straw, and the haunting ghost of boiled onions. It's unforgettable. The tables wobble like they've seen things, each scarred with initials, crude drawings, and the occasional knife mark. The benches groan under cloaks, boots, and poor decisions. You tread carefully. The floor offers unpleasant textures best left unnamed. The crowd is alive. Laughter erupts in one corner. Voices clash in another over the cost of a pig. A woman slams her mug with such force half the contents fly out. No one bats an eye. A man beside you stares blankly at the wall, as if he's either pondering the mysteries of the universe or forgetting how chairs work. Then someone sneezes, and half the room instinctively leans away. And still, Despite the full assault on every one of your modern expectations, there's something oddly comforting about this place. The tavern is alive, crude, noisy, warm in all the wrong ways, but alive. It's the medieval version of a community center, only louder, sweatier, and about 400% less sanitary. You find a seat. It's damp. It may be cursed, but for now, it's yours. The layout looks like someone arranged the furniture during an earthquake, and then just walked away. No blueprint, no cozy nooks, just a scattered sprawl of tables, mismatched benches, wobbly barrels, and the occasional wooden crate trying its best to be a chair. Too cramped in some corners, too empty in others. It depends mostly on how much you've had to drink. The hearth is the only real center. A broad, open fire along one wall, glowing, crackling, and generously sharing its smoke with everyone nearby. People press in like moths with mugs, vying for heat, for light, for something familiar. Those closest to the flames guard their spots like treasure. The rest? Well, that's what ale is for. The bar, if one can call it that, is really just a thick plank balanced across two barrels, sagging under the weight of jugs, elbows, and unpaid debts. Behind it, the tavern keeper, juggling tankards, barking orders, and glaring at that one man who still hasn't paid for last Tuesday. There are no menus. You ask what's available, and you brace yourself. Usually, the answer is something between ale and wait your turn. In the back, a staircase climbs unevenly into darkness. Each step creaks in protest. One of the railings has a boot hanging from it, either as decoration or warning. No one's quite sure. Some taverns have a hidden room, maybe for storage, maybe for dice games, maybe for people who said the wrong thing to the barmaid. It's best not to ask. The walls are stained with years of soot, the windows covered in grease-dark cloth or dried animal hide. Every surface polished smooth, not by care, but by generations of elbows, mugs, and maybe a stray chicken or two. Yet somehow, beneath the grime, under the shouting, it works. There's an order to the mess. Everyone knows where to sit, when to shout, when to duck. Not organized, but alive. And in this world, there is always one ruler. Not the local noble, not the taxman. Number. The ruler of the tavern is the keeper. They might not wear a crown, but don't let that fool you. They run it all. Cook, server, accountant, bouncer, and the enforcer of barroom justice. If it's a man, he's likely shaped like a beer barrel, all arms and grumbles, built from cured meat and regret. If it's a woman, and often it is, she's sharper than a smith's file and can silence an entire room with just one look. Either way, they've seen it all, heard worse, and cleaned blood from the straw floor before their morning porridge. Regulars get a nod, strangers get a stare, troublemakers get a mug to the face. Behind the counter, they keep a perfect mental log. Who's paid? Who still owes? Who's had one drink too many? They don't need parchment. They don't need ink. Tavern memory is terrifying. And they set the tone. If the barkeep is cheerful, the whole place hums. If not, you'd better sip fast and keep your clever comments to yourself. They are the referee in every scuffle, the judge of every cheating game, and the first to reach for a club when things turn sideways. And they know everything. Who's drowning in debt? Who's sneaking behind whose back? Who just rolled into town with a fake name and a nervous smile? Need intel? Slide them a coin? Need protection? Stay close? Need a favor? Better hope you didn't break a mug last week. Sometimes they've got help. A daughter, a nephew, a spouse, or some half-adopted orphan now strong enough to carry a barrel on each shoulder. These poor souls serve drinks, mop floors, and pray not to get stepped on by someone twice their size. So even if the tavern feels like chaos to your tired, city-trained mind, it's not. It's balance. Messy, loud, occasionally violent, but balanced. And right in the center, like a battle-hardened deity wrapped in an apron, stands the one soul keeping everything and everyone from tipping into mayhem. The tavern keeper. Eventually, you settle onto a wobbly bench. You dodge an elbow. Someone's soup nearly hits your sleeve. Your boots are soaked. Your throat is dry. And now, it's time for the main attraction, the drink. Just don't expect a wine list or a clean cup. This is no luxury inn. Your choices are limited, lukewarm, and possibly life-threatening. Let's begin with the standard, ale. Dark, dense, brewed in the same room where the dog sleeps. It's cloudy, unfiltered, and sometimes comes with texture, bits of grain, stray yeast, or possibly a mustache hair from the previous customer. It's not cold, of course. There's no ice, and you don't ask how long it's been sitting in the barrel. You just raise the mug and hope. Next up, mead, honey wine. Sounds elegant, and sometimes it is, but more often, it's syrupy, sharp, and slightly unpredictable. If the tavern keeper brewed it themselves, it might taste like a summer field, or it might taste like vengeance and bee stings. It's the drink of choice for nobles, wedding guests, and that one bard who refuses to be paid in anything else. Then there's cider, crafted from apples that were either freshly picked or left to roll beneath the tree for 3 long weeks. Tangy, cloudy, served in a chipped mug that moonlights as a soup bowl by morning. It's popular in orchard country, or with anyone who just wants something strong enough to forget the smell of the man next to them. Wine? Technically, yes. But unless you're somewhere near the Mediterranean, or the local bishops in town, what you'll get is more vinegar than vintage, thinned with water, soured with time, poured with a side glance and a muttered insult. And then there's water. Brave of you. Because unboiled water in this world is more curse than cure. Clean wells are rare. Boiling costs wood. So even the children drink ale, not to get drunk, but to stay alive. No one here is measuring shots or stirring cocktails with sprigs of rosemary. Your cup is made of wood, or clay, or tin. Some still carry the scent of last night's stew. You raise your mug, sniff cautiously, take a small sip. It's warm, it's bitter, and somehow, in this dim, smoky chaos, it's exactly what you needed. Because in a medieval tavern, if it's wet and doesn't kill you immediately, it's a good year. So, survive the drink? Barely. Now comes the next challenge. Your stomach reminds you. You haven't eaten since dawn, and your last meal was mostly barley and disappointment. It's time to eat. But don't expect menus, no waiters, and absolutely no one asking if you're gluten-free. You don't order in a medieval tavern. You ask what's left, and hope it's still warm, and only vaguely suspicious. The star of the show is often pottage, a thick, bubbling stew of grains, root vegetables, and whatever protein wandered too close to the pot. It's been simmering since Monday. It's Thursday. New ingredients get added each day. Nothing is ever removed. It's less a dish, and more an archaeological timeline. If there's meat involved, you're in luck. It might be rabbit, or pigeon, or the chicken that wandered under the wrong table. If it's game, well, it could be tender, or aged beyond reason and seasoned only by desperation. Your bowl is made of wood, your spoon is optional. Some use their fingers, most bring their own knives. Eating here is strictly a BYO cutlery affair. As for napkins, there are none. Just the sleeve of your tunic, or a communal rag that has seen more than its fair share of tragedy. There's bread too, dense, dark, and capable of inflicting bruises. If it's soft, it was baked today. If it's hard, it was baked last week. Either way, it pairs well with cheese that smells like an old boot and has recently developed a personality. You might spot salted fish, maybe a pickled egg or two, and occasionally, a tavern will advertise a special, which just means we had too much of this lying around. Flavor, optional. Texture, unpredictable. But in the glow of the firelight, with noise swirling around you and something warm in your hands, it's not bad. It fills the belly. It soothes the hunger. And if you avoid looking directly at what's floating in the bowl, it might even feel like comfort. You're not here to dine. You're here to survive. And once your seat is secure, hopefully one without a dagger still embedded in it, you begin to notice what truly brings this place to life. The people. A medieval tavern is the original social network. Loud, unfiltered, occasionally fictional, and deeply, unapologetically, overshared. To your left, a red-faced farmer, 4 ales deep, telling the same story about a sideways calf birth for the 5th time tonight. He slaps your shoulder mid-sentence, like you're either an old friend or a decent stand-in for the pig he usually drinks with. Across the room, a hooded figure lurks in the shadows, nursing a drink slowly, silently. He could be a disgraced monk, a wandering thief, or just painfully bad at small talk. Either way, you probably don't want to find out what's under the cloak behind the stables. Near the hearth, a soldier in dented armor is weaving a tale so grand it clearly isn't true. Dragons, Frenchmen, a talking sword that recites poetry in Latin. No one believes a word, and no one cares. His mug is full, his audience is howling with laughter, and for tonight, he's a king. Across the room, a merchant is shouting about grain prices, sweat glistening under the firelight. He tosses gold coins onto the table with dramatic flair, the kind of flair that usually ends with being robbed before sunrise. At a warped table near the wall, 2 locals play dice with serious faces. One of them cheats, the other notices, and lets it happen. They're saving the argument for when the ale runs dry. In a dim corner, a bard strums a song that sounds suspiciously improvised. His voice cracks on the high notes, but no one minds. He's in tune, and he's wearing pants. That's already an improvement over last night's performer. Women drift through the crowd, some part of the tavern staff, others running their own side business. They're confident, sharp-eyed, and absolutely not to be underestimated. They'll wink, they'll laugh, or they'll break your nose. It depends entirely on your tone. Children dart between legs like mischievous shadows, snatching bits of bread or stray coins and vanishing just as fast. No one stops them. It's part of the rhythm here. The flow, the tavern's own strange ballet. Every face is watching, drinking, scheming, or politely pretending not to notice the man asleep under the table. Because this place, this smoky, clamorous chaos, is more than a pub. It's performance. And tonight, you're part of the cast. Forget bards and ballads for a moment. The true music of a medieval tavern isn't made with instruments. It's the sound of life lived loud. It starts with mugs, wooden, tin, ceramic, clinking, clashing, crashing. Celebration, disagreement, doesn't matter. It all ends in the same cheer. Then comes the laughter. Deep, roaring, full-belly laughs that rise and tumble through the rafters. Most of it makes no sense. A farmer chuckles at his own joke about hay. A knight loses it over the word pottage. A monk wheezes every time someone says duck. You learn not to ask. Voices layer over each other like a sonic quilt. Stories, arguments, gossip, and bad theology all vying for dominance in one giant rooster fight of sound. The barkeep shouts orders while swatting flies. A barmaid curses a drunk who grabbed her. Someone somewhere is chanting, "Another round," like a sacred hymn. In the corner, the bard, with a lute held together by hope and twine, strums the same 4 chords. Sometimes he sings of lost love, sometimes of chickens found, sometimes of noblemen who wore their pants inside out. No one listens, unless he starts naming names. Then, things get either hilarious or violent. Someone spills their drink. Someone belches loud enough to wake ancestors. Someone else slips off a bench and continues the conversation from the floor as if it were intentional. Dogs bark in the distance. A goat bleats. Why is there a goat? Chairs scrape across the dirt like thunder in a wooden canyon. It's not peaceful, but it has a rhythm. Every now and then, the noise stops. Not for long, just a strange, sudden hush. 3 seconds of silence, and then someone farts like it's an announcement from the gods. The music begins again. This isn't background noise. This is the tavern's heartbeat, unrefined, unruly, and completely alive. If you let it wash over you, really listen, it starts to make a strange kind of sense, a harmony, born from disorder. And like the stew, like the ale, like the stories, it only grows louder the longer you stay. Once the bellies are full and the drinks flow without pause, the tavern changes shape. It's no longer just a place to rest and refuel. It becomes something else entirely, a medieval casino. No velvet ropes, no rules, just shouting, and stakes that rise with every roll. Gambling is the main event, and everyone plays, from grizzled warriors to barefoot boys with borrowed dice. There's no dealer, no house, no one keeping score except the gods of luck. Just a splintered table, a handful of copper coins, and the slow, certain realization that someone here is about to lose their dignity. Dice are the game of choice. Carved from bone, wood, or whatever was lying nearby, they tumble across the tables like miniature thunder, each roll followed by cheers, groans, or dramatic accusations of sorcery. No one trusts the dice, and yet everyone uses them. Then there are cards. In the more refined taverns, if such a word applies, you'll find thick, hand-painted decks, corners worn soft by years of arguments. There's always one card missing, and no one agrees on the rules. Sometimes the goal is to get the highest number. Other times, it's to match shapes. And sometimes, it's to make up the rules as you go and shout louder than anyone who disagrees. Think poker, but with more slapping. Wagers range from copper coins to half-finished drinks, to the neighbor's goat. One man bets his boots, another, his freedom for the evening. He loses, by the way. The regulars are smooth, too smooth. They shuffle fast, roll slow, and smile like they already know the outcome. They're cheating, of course. Everyone is. A swapped die here, a marked card there, a well-timed cough when the lucky player leans in. If you win big, you'd better buy a round, or you might not leave with your shoes. If you lose, you smile, pretend it was intentional, and slowly slide your chair toward the door. Other games break out in the corners. Arm wrestling, thumb wars, and the eternal tavern classic, who can drink the most without falling over. The winner gets applause, the loser gets the floor, and a headache that lasts until the next market day. Even when no one quite remembers the rules and the stakes make no sense, there's something addictive in the chaos. Because here, luck isn't just play. It's a wager, a risk, a dance with your dignity, and sometimes your pants. As the evening deepens and the room grows warm with bodies and breath, a different kind of performance begins. One made not of dice, but of words. This is Story Hour. The bard in the corner adjusts his stool, plucks a few awkward notes on his lute, which sounds like an old boot being stepped on, and clears his throat with theatrical flair. He's missing a few teeth, but not a speck of confidence. And with a grin, he launches into a tale of love and doom, about a noble knight who fell head over heels for a mermaid and promptly drowned while quoting poetry. No one buys it. Everyone listens anyway, because here, truth is optional, but entertainment, essential. Around the tavern, others join in. Not performers, just patrons, fueled by ale and boldness. One man swears he once wrestled a bear and walked away. Another insists a witch turned his cow into a goat. It didn't moo right after. A third claims royal blood, a cousin of Charlemagne, if you trace through his mother's neighbor's nephew. Every tale starts the same way. You won't believe this, and they're right. We don't, but we want to. Tall tales become ballads. Accidents become legends. Someone tells a joke so bad it loops back around to brilliance. Someone else recites a poem probably stolen from a monastery scroll. The room claps, or boos, or throws bread, all depending on how sober the crowd is and how many lines they rhymed with ale. Once in a while, a true performer enters. A skald, a minstrel, a traveler with polished songs and calloused feet. They trade stories for silver, music for shelter, and if they're lucky, a corner to sleep where the straw's still dry. They're masters of the craft, and they know the one unbreakable law of tavern tales. Never let facts ruin a good story. Because in this smoky haven, where mugs are never quite empty and firelight dances on soot-black walls, stories matter. They aren't just pastimes. They're glue. They're how you make friends, enemies, and the kind of drinking partner you'll still be arguing with 10 years later. By midnight, half the room is reenacting a tale about a one-legged knight who defeated 6 thieves with nothing but a ladle and a sharp wit. People laugh, people cheer, people forget it's all nonsense. Because here, in this glorious mess, every liar becomes a legend, if the story is good enough. As the night deepens, and the ale flows as freely as the stories, something shifts in the air. A kind of warm, boozy confidence begins to settle over the room. The bard is midway through his third ballad, this one about unfaithful shepherdesses, and suddenly, everyone seems romantic. Welcome to medieval flirting, where subtlety has long since fled the premises. It starts with a glance, or rather, a squint, one eye half closed, struggling to see through a haze of mead and poor lighting. A man with 2 teeth and unlimited optimism leans across a bench and slurs, "My lady, your beauty blazes brighter than the hearth." She responds by flinging a crust of bread at his forehead. The room erupts in applause. Others try their luck with slightly more charm, offering to refill mugs, pay clumsy compliments, or carry a bowl of stew without spilling it. Spoiler, it still spills. If you're a woman in the tavern, staff, guest, or merchant passing through, you've likely had to dodge at least 3 amateur poets, 2 ale-soaked arm wrestlers, and 1 man who thinks balancing a knife on his nose is impressive. Sometimes it works. Usually it ends with a bruised ego or an emptied coin pouch. But for those truly seeking connection, the tavern offers more than flirting. Courtesans glide through the crowd with ease and confidence. They know who has money, who has charm, and who will be unconscious before reaching the stairs. Their arrangements are quiet, but the consequences? Very loud. Jealous lovers spark fires faster than spilled lanterns. One misplaced laugh, one curious glance, and suddenly it's a scene. Tables tip, mugs become weapons, benches splinter again. And yet, somehow, amid the chaos, real sparks fly. A shy baker's daughter and a tired stonemason giggle over shared stew. Two farmers bond over their shared hatred of turnips. A monk accidentally flirts with a nun. Love, or something close enough, survives even here. Because in the medieval tavern, romance is 1 part courage, 1 part clumsiness, and 1 part not falling face first into your soup. You might win a heart, you might earn a slap. Either way, you'll remember it, or at least hear about it tomorrow. And then, inevitably, it happens. Maybe someone spilled a drink. Maybe someone lost at dice. Maybe 2 guests argued over the same bench, or someone made an unfortunate joke involving a goat, a bowl of soup, or someone's mother. Doesn't matter. In an instant, the tavern shifts. The music stops. A stool flies. A mug hits the floor with a dramatic thud. Someone shouts, "Hold my bread," and launches over a table with the grace of a tipsy trebuchet. No one is surprised. In fact, most don't even pause their drinking. Because a tavern brawl in the Middle Ages isn't rare. It's expected. It's practically tradition. And while it may sound dangerous, it's usually more comedic than catastrophic. Wild swings, missed punches. Someone falls face first into someone else's stew. Hair gets pulled, beards get yanked, shirts rip open, intentionally or not. The tavern keeper bellows commands like a war captain, brandishing a ladle in one hand and a very large spoon in the other. Some jump in without knowing why. They saw movement, felt the vibe, and followed their fists. Others cheer, place bets, or gently move their mugs out of splash range. Weapons are rare. Everyone knows. Drawing steel turns a rowdy tumble into exile. And no one wants to be banned from the only warm meal in town. Eventually, someone hits the floor and stays there. Someone else slumps against the wall and quietly reevaluates their life choices. The fight fizzles out. Just like that. No dramatic ending, just a shared shrug. And the strangest part? 10 minutes later, it's as if nothing happened. The bruised are laughing, the guilty are forgiven, mugs are refilled, and a song starts anew. No hard feelings, no complaints, just a new nickname or two, like One-Eyed Arnold or Benchbreaker Bill, because here, a tavern brawl is just part of the evening, messy, absurd, and oddly, bonding. And if no one bleeds too much, it's just another chapter in the night's story. So now, the brawl is over. The bard has passed out mid-ballad. Your belly is full of mystery stew and cider with questionable intentions. It's time to sleep, or at least attempt to. But don't expect goose feathers or lavender-scented linens. This isn't a spa. It's a medieval tavern. If lodging is offered, it's likely up a staircase that moans with every step, past crooked beams and floors that test your balance and your skull. The rooms, tiny, cold, and definitely shared. Privacy? Not here. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with strangers. Some snore like bells from a distant cathedral. Others talk in their sleep, in languages you don't even recognize. Beds, if you can call them that, are lumpy mats stuffed with straw, thin, uneven, and crawling with what medieval folks affectionately called companions. You lay down fully dressed, boots on, dagger tucked under your pillow, not for comfort, but for strategy. Blankets are communal, so are smells. And if someone had garlic for dinner, someone always had garlic. It becomes an intimate part of your dreams. Too poor or too drunk for a room? Then your bed is a bench, or the floor, or curled up in the corner near the hearth, next to a dog that may or may not belong to anyone. You'll be stepped on, probably sneezed on, and possibly used as a footrest. The tavern never fully quiets. Even after the last mug is drained and the last punch is patched, there's always a whisper, a sleeper muttering, a log popping in the fire, a single echoing fart floating through the rafters like a final hymn. And yet, somehow, you sleep. It's not clean, it's not comfortable, but it's warm enough and safe enough. The fire pushes the worst of the cold away. The tavern keeper keeps watch, one eye open, a club in reach. And the noise? It becomes its own kind of lullaby. Human, alive, reassuring in its way. You wake with a sore neck, a dry mouth, and a mystery bruise. But for a few short hours, you've slept among wanderers, farmhands, rogues, and fools. No kings, no quiet. Just the sound of breath in straw and the faint, hopeful thought, are my boots still here? Dawn arrives like a nosy neighbor, pale light creeping through the cracks in the shutters, gently smacking your eyelids with all the tenderness of a tax collector. The tavern has changed, not quieter, but subdued. You crack one eye open. There's a boot on your chest. Someone nearby is mumbling about sheep taxes. The bard snores beneath a table, clutching his lute like a long-lost lover. A chicken hops across the floor, pecking at a crust of stale bread. No one knows where it came from. No one asks. The fire's burned low. Ash and smoke linger in the air. The warmth has faded, but the smell, oh, the smell, remains loyal. Around you, a few brave souls stir, groaning softly, waking from battles they fought only in their own heads. One man sits up, blinks at the room, and immediately lies back down. Decision made. The tavern keeper, of course, is already up. They clatter mugs, sweep piles of straw into new shapes, and reheat something in a pot that smells strangely vengeful. They bang a ladle against a mug, announcing the morning with all the subtlety of a battlefield trumpet. Up or out. That's the breakfast bell. There's no buffet. If you're lucky, there's more pottage, thicker than last night. Bread is warmed, ale is watered, and no one dares complain. Some dunk their heads in the rain barrel outside and call it clean living. You check your pouch, 2 coins, and a button. Better than expected. Your boots are still here. One has a bite mark. You don't ask. You just call it a win. New faces begin to shuffle in. Travelers, farmers, workers bracing for another day of livestock, taxes, and neighbors. The tavern stirs, like a sleepy beast, waking one limb at a time. Someone starts retelling a story from the night before. Already, the tale has changed. Now there were 2 fights, and the bard summoned a ghost. Everyone nods, solemn, as if it's the gospel truth. The night was chaos. The morning is groggy, smoky, and full of quiet regret. And yet, you smile, because somehow you survived it. You felt the sweat, the smoke, the sticky floor beneath your feet. You've endured the shouting, the dice, the pottage, and possibly a flying bench. And beneath it all, something becomes clear. The medieval tavern was never just a drinking den. It was the heartbeat of the community. In a world without phones, without papers, without posts or pings, this was where the news lived. A merchant could share stories from distant ports. A soldier could speak of war. A bard could sing songs that stitched strangers into neighbors. Here, farmers sat beside blacksmiths. Pilgrims shared bread with thieves. Strangers became friends, or at the very least, drinking companions. For one round, maybe two. In here, the lines of class blurred, rumors bloomed, alliances formed, and grudges? Well, they either dissolved into laughter or simmered hotter, depending on how the dice landed. This wasn't just a place to pass time. It was a marketplace of people, a center of gravity. Deals were struck, pacts sealed with calloused hands and spilled cider. It was courtroom, confessional, and theater, all crammed into one smoky room. Here, you could find a job, lose your purse, get married, or start a feud, all before the stew got cold. But the tavern gave something more. Something you couldn't buy from a stall or pray for at a chapel. Relief from the cold, from the burden of survival, from the unrelenting seriousness of simply staying alive in the Middle Ages. For a few precious hours, you could sit near the fire, hear a bad joke, sing a worse song, and forget for just a moment how hard the world could be beyond those walls. Even if the ale was warm, the bread stale, and the bed scratchy and shared, you were here, alive, among the living. And in a time where a sharp winter, a sharp sword, or a nameless sickness could end a life without notice, that was no small comfort. So when you stepped into a medieval tavern, you weren't just buying a drink. You were buying belonging, a story, a place by the fire, a shared moment, and if you were lucky, a spot to sleep, where the embers still glowed. Because long before cafes and pubs, before coffee houses and cozy diners, there was the tavern, loud, grimy, unfiltered, and absolutely unforgettable. Now, our next journey takes us far from the muddy streets of a medieval village, to the sun-drenched temples of ancient Egypt, to a queen whose name still echoes through stone and time. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalized in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a gaze carved in eternal calm, Nefertiti was simply a mystery. Her name means, "The beautiful one has come." But from where? No one knows for sure. Some say she was the daughter of a high-ranking Egyptian official, perhaps even the sister of the man she would marry. Others believe she was a foreign princess, sent as part of a royal alliance. Her origins remain a fog, but her presence, blinding. Nefertiti entered the historical record not with a whisper, but with lightning. Brilliant, sudden, transformative. She did not arrive as a passive queen, but as an equal. Alongside Pharaoh Akhenaten, she would help lead a cultural and spiritual revolution that shattered Egypt's centuries-old traditions. Together, they dismantled the pantheon of gods and raised a single deity, Aten, the sun disk, above all others. It was bold, controversial, almost heretical. And Nefertiti wasn't a quiet figure behind a throne. She led ceremonies, made offerings. She was even shown in art wielding weapons, a role typically reserved for kings. She appears in more artwork from that period than Akhenaten himself. Not bowed, not hidden, but upright, commanding. Occasionally, larger than life. In a society where rulers were seen as divine, her closeness to the pharaoh, spiritual and political, hinted at something more. Maybe she wasn't just queen. Maybe she ruled. But revolutions rarely come without resistance. The old priesthood fumed, their gods erased, their temples left behind. A new capital was built, far from tradition, Akhetaten, now known as Amarna. And through it all, Nefertiti remained, etched into limestone, sung about in hymns, a symbol of light and change and power. And then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished. No tomb, no remains, no clear end, just silence. It's as if history, after shining its full light upon her, suddenly looked away. And maybe, that's where her legend truly begins. Because to understand her rise, we must understand the man beside her, the one who challenged Egypt's 1,000-year legacy, who left behind the name Amenhotep IV to become something entirely new, Akhenaten. Now, our next journey takes us far from the muddy streets of a medieval village, to the sun-drenched temples of ancient Egypt, to a queen whose name still echoes through stone and time. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalized in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a gaze carved in eternal calm, Nefertiti was simply a mystery. Her name means, "The Beautiful One has come." But from where? No one knows for sure. Some say she was the daughter of a high-ranking Egyptian official, perhaps even the sister of the man she would marry. Others believe she was a foreign princess, sent as part of a royal alliance. Her origins remain a fog, but her presence, blinding. Nefertiti entered the historical record not with a whisper, but with lightning. Brilliant, sudden, transformative. She did not arrive as a passive queen, but as an equal. Alongside Pharaoh Akhenaten, she would help lead a cultural and spiritual revolution that shattered Egypt's centuries-old traditions. Together, they dismantled the pantheon of gods and raised a single deity, Aten, the sun disk, above all others. It was bold, controversial, almost heretical. And Nefertiti wasn't a quiet figure behind a throne. She led ceremonies, made offerings. She was even shown in art wielding weapons, a role typically reserved for kings. She appears in more artwork from that period than Akhenaten himself. Not bowed, not hidden, but upright, commanding. Occasionally, larger than life. In a society where rulers were seen as divine, her closeness to the pharaoh, spiritual and political, hinted at something more. Maybe she wasn't just queen. Maybe she ruled. But revolutions rarely come without resistance. The old priesthood fumed, their gods erased, their temples left behind. A new capital was built, far from tradition, Akhetaten, now known as Amarna. And through it all, Nefertiti remained, etched into limestone, sung about in hymns, a symbol of light and change and power. And then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished. No tomb, no remains, no clear end, just silence. It's as if history, after shining its full light upon her, suddenly looked away. And maybe, that's where her legend truly begins. Because to understand her rise, we must understand the man beside her, the one who challenged Egypt's 1,000-year legacy, who left behind the name Amenhotep IV to become something entirely new, Akhenaten. When he took the throne, he turned away from centuries of tradition, abandoning the mighty god Amun and declaring a new truth. There was only one God worthy of worship, the sun itself, Aten. But this wasn't just a spiritual shift. It was an earthquake that cracked the very foundations of Egyptian civilization. Imagine a world built on temples, rituals, and priests, being told almost overnight that their gods were false, their ceremonies obsolete. Akhenaten didn't simply preach monotheism, he enforced it. Temples were shuttered, the name of Amun carved out of stone, statues destroyed, entire cities abandoned. And in their place, he built something new, a city carved for light, Akhetaten, today called Amarna, a place where the morning sun would rise between two cliffs, casting sacred gold upon the streets. And Nefertiti? She wasn't watching from the sidelines. In every relief of the period, she stands beside Akhenaten, arms lifted to a ten's raise, her daughters gathered close, faces tilted skyward, bathed in divine sunlight. It was a family portrait unlike anything Egypt had seen before. The art itself changed. Gone were the rigid, formal poses. Now came curves, emotion, warmth. The royal couple embraced. They kissed their children. They sat in robes, quietly praying beneath the sun. Nefertiti was everywhere in this world, and in some ways, she outshone the king. Some believe she held real political power, perhaps even ruled as co-regent. Inscriptions mention a name, Neferuaten, a variation some historians believe Nefertiti adopted when stepping into authority alone. Did Akhenaten share the throne out of devotion, strategy, necessity? We don't know. But we do know this. Without Nefertiti, this revolution may not have lasted as long as it did. But all revolutions are fragile. The gods do not take kindly to being cast aside. And the people, they were watching, quiet, waiting. By the height of her influence, Nefertiti was no longer just a queen. She was a symbol, not just of beauty, but of divine womanhood and sovereign strength. Yes, Egypt had seen powerful queens before, Ahmose Nefertari, Hatshepsut. But Nefertiti felt different. She wasn't ruling from behind a curtain. She wasn't seizing power through war. She was reshaping the spiritual core of Egypt alongside her husband, in real time, a living goddess. She bore Akhenaten 6 daughters, Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhesenpaten, and others. They appear frequently in the art, climbing into their mother's lap or reaching for her cheek, their tiny fingers brushing stone lips. Curiously, no sons are ever confirmed. In a kingdom obsessed with lineage, this posed a problem and a mystery. Some suggest Akhenaten had sons with other wives. Others whisper darker theories, hinting at relationships more scandalous than sacred. What is certain is that motherhood was essential to Nefertiti's image. She was often depicted holding her children close, their faces joyful, her gaze warm. These were not frozen statues, but living memories etched in stone, moments that softened the divine into something tender. And yet, there was another side to her, one far more powerful. In multiple scenes, Nefertiti wears the blue crown, the war crown, usually reserved for male pharaohs. She's seen riding in chariots, offering sacrifices, and striking enemies with a raised weapon, without Akhenaten beside her. These weren't decorative roles. These were sacred duties performed by kings. It reveals a quiet truth. Nefertiti wasn't just supporting the throne. She may have been preparing to inherit it. Later whispers in stone suggest that as Akhenaten's health began to fade, perhaps from inherited illness, perhaps from the strain of rule, Nefertiti began to take more control. But then, the trail begins to vanish. In the final years of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti simply vanishes. No dramatic farewell, no elaborate tomb inscription, no public mourning, just silence. Did she die? Did she fall from grace? Or was she preparing to become something even greater than queen? One day, she was everywhere, etched in stone, praised in hymns, standing tall beside a revolutionary pharaoh. And then, like a gust of desert wind, she was gone. No Egyptian queen had ever been so visible, and none had ever vanished so completely. Around the 12th year of Akhenaten's 17-year rule, the record grows quiet. Her name stops appearing in temple walls. Her image fades from the art. No burial scene, no tomb inscription, nothing. For someone so vital to the era's spiritual and cultural upheaval, this absence is not just strange, it's a void, a black hole in history. So, what happened? One theory is simple. She died. Childbirth was perilous, even for royalty. And her daughter Meketaten also disappears from the record around the same time. A double tragedy, perhaps. Mother and daughter lost together. But if that were true, why no tribute, no ritual, no temple carved in her name? This was a woman revered like a goddess. A quiet exit feels wrong. Another theory is political. Maybe she was pushed aside. Akhenaten, increasingly isolated in his theological dream, could have favored a different consort. Or perhaps palace politics turned against her. Some suggest a co-ruler appeared at this time, a mysterious figure named Smenkhkare. Was this a prince? A half-brother? Or was it Nefertiti under a new name? That's the most tantalizing theory, that she didn't vanish, she transformed. Inscriptions mention Neferuaten, a ruler who used feminine grammatical forms and referred to Akhenaten as her beloved husband. Was this Nefertiti, crowned as pharaoh in her own right? If so, she would have joined the rarest circle of rulers, a woman king, like Hatshepsut before her. But this trail, too, fades into the sand. Neferuaten's reign ends abruptly, and then a new name appears, one that would become the most famous in all of Egypt, Tutankhaten, later changed to Tutankhamun, a child king, barely old enough to hold a scepter. He would undo everything his parents built. He reopened temples, restored the old gods, abandoned Akhenaten, not because he chose to, but because someone guided him. The question is, who? His father was almost certainly Akhenaten, but his mother? History shrinks from that answer. Some say Nefertiti was his stepmother. Others believe she may have been his birth mother, based on the art, the timing, and the influence that clearly shaped his early rule. Because someone experienced in politics, religion, and symbolism was behind the scenes. Could it have been Nefertiti, still present, ruling from the shadows? Or perhaps it was the high priest Ai, possibly her father, working alongside her to quietly steer Egypt back to its old beliefs. There's a golden shrine in Tutankhamun's tomb. It shows a woman anointing the young king. Her features, eerily familiar. If it was Nefertiti, it means she never disappeared at all. She simply changed her role, changed her name, and stayed close to power in a different form. But without a tomb, without a mummy, without the final word, we are left with only fragments, half names, broken reliefs, faces that look like hers, but never say her name. And maybe that's what makes her story timeless. She entered history like lightning and left like smoke. But in every flicker of torchlight on ancient stone, in every broken carving, in every unanswered question, she lingers. Not just as a queen, not even as a pharaoh, but as something far rarer, a legend who refused to be forgotten. If she truly guided Tutankhamun, then her fingerprints are everywhere, but her name, gone, scrubbed from walls, omitted from king lists, erased, as though someone feared the memory of a woman who once ruled like a god. And yet, the irony is exquisite, because in searching for his story, the world found hers. For someone who stood at the center of Egypt's most radical transformation, queen, priestess, possibly even pharaoh, Nefertiti left behind no confirmed tomb, no funerary mask, no golden sarcophagus, no hieroglyphs whispering her final prayer to the gods. It's as though she vanished into sand and silence. And that silence has haunted scholars for over a century. This was a culture obsessed with the afterlife, where even the lowliest official was embalmed, mummified, and buried with maps for the soul's journey. How, then, could one of Egypt's most powerful women simply disappear? Some suggest her burial was hasty, a quiet end during the chaotic twilight of the Amarna period. Her legacy, once radiant, may have become too dangerous, too radical. Her tomb dismantled, her name defaced, her story buried as part of the counter-revolution that followed Akhenaten's death. Revenge was not just political, it was architectural. Hieroglyphs were chiseled out, names blotted from eternity. But other voices, more hopeful, offer a different theory, that her tomb was never lost, just misunderstood, or still hidden. In 2015, radar scans of Tutankhamun's tomb, KV-62, revealed possible sealed chambers behind its painted walls. Could she be resting just inches away, unseen, untouched, a queen entombed beside her son, yet sealed off by time? The idea captivated the world, a buried chamber, a lost queen, a final secret waiting beneath the stone. But deeper scans proved inconclusive. Excavations slowed, funding faded, and once again, Nefertiti slipped back into myth. And yet, her absence speaks loudly. We have no tomb, no mummy, no final words etched in stone, but we have her face, dozens of times over, painted, carved, immortalized, most famously, in limestone. In a studio once buried in the sands of Amarna, German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt brushed away centuries of dust in 1912 and uncovered something that stunned him speechless. A bust. Her bust. Delicate, poised, timeless, one eye unfinished, perhaps deliberately, perhaps abandoned in haste. But even incomplete, she radiates something more than beauty, something haunting. Behind museum glass at Berlin's Neues Museum, she gazes forward, serene and unknowable, her neck elegant, her crown sky blue, her expression still and eternal. And the world saw her, truly saw her, and could not look away. She became more than a queen, more than a name. She became a symbol of power, of grace, of mystery. But even this sculpture is not without its controversy. Where should it reside? Who should claim her? Who speaks for the silent? In a way, that too mirrors her legacy. Always at the center of power, yet always just beyond reach. And so, we are left with an unfinished story, a riddle carved in limestone, a life written in fragments, a queen remembered more for her vanishing than for her end. But maybe that's how she wanted it. Because for all the monuments that crumble and all the names that fade, we still say hers. Not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. Because in every whispered theory, every glimmer of gold under ancient dust, every sleepless scholar with a brush in hand, she is still there, waiting. Germany acquired the bust of Nefertiti in an era when antiquities laws were, at best, vague, and at worst, non-existent. For decades, Egypt has asked for her return, arguing that she belongs not behind museum glass, but beneath the sun that once kissed her skin, in the land where she stood, beneath Aten's rays. But Germany has refused. They say the sculpture is too fragile to move. Others quietly admit the truth. Prestige. Nefertiti brings in crowds. She is, after all, their Mona Lisa. Yet wherever she stands, Berlin or Amarna, she has transformed the way we see ancient women. She wasn't a passive ornament. She wasn't a background figure. Her bust speaks of command, of decision, of knowing. She looks like someone who once held empires in her hands, and she did. It's remarkable how a single sculpture, fragile, silent, can resurrect a woman lost to time. We may never find her tomb. We may never know how she died. But through that face, through limestone lips and unfinished eyes, she achieved something beyond royal. She became immortal, not in gold, not in carved tomb walls, but in us, in memory, in myth. The bust is still, but the story it tells speaks louder every year. Nefertiti's tale lives in the space between stone and silence, between what we know and what we wish we knew. She's a paradox, one of the most documented women of her era, and still almost entirely unknowable. Over the centuries, she has become many things. To some, a goddess in human form. To others, a strategist, a queenmaker, a ruler in disguise. To romantics, a tragic figure lost in the sandstorm of history. To skeptics, an ambitious player in collapsing dynasties. But here's what we do know. She wasn't just a royal wife. She was present, in rites, in battle, in law. Not just beside power, but wielding it. In a world that crowned men as divine, she stood among them. Not through rebellion, but through presence, through poise, through precision. She embodied the Atenic revolution, not just spiritually, but visually. She became the sun's human form, a bridge between the heavens and the earth. And after her disappearance, they tried to erase her, smashed her statues, defaced her name, buried her role in silence. And yet, here we are, 3,000 years later, still whispering her name. Why? Because myth survives where fact falls silent. Because when a woman becomes both icon and enigma, she enters a space where time can no longer touch her, where the questions echo louder than the answers. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly how she wanted it. To be remembered, not defined, admired, not controlled, endless, not entombed. More than 3 millennia have passed since she last walked beneath Egypt's sun. And yet, her shadow stretches still, etched in stone, reflected in glass, whispered in lecture halls and echoed across 1,000 retellings. Unlike most historical figures, she hasn't faded. She grows. Because it's not just the beauty. We've seen beauty before. It's the mystery, the challenge in her gaze, the unfinished sentence of her life. Each generation has reimagined her. In the 1920s, a mysterious queen, exotic and silent. In the feminist wave, a symbol of stolen power. In modern times, a style icon, a political force, a lost monarch, maybe even a pharaoh. She has lived 1,000 second lives, not through records, but through imagination. And maybe that's the most fitting afterlife of all. Because in ancient Egypt, immortality wasn't just mummification, it was memory. If your name was spoken, if your story was retold, if your image endured, you lived on. You passed through the veil, you dined with the gods, you became eternal. And Nefertiti, whether by divine plan or human brilliance, has done exactly that. Her name is whispered across continents. Her face, one of the most recognized in all of human history. And her story, though fractured, still holds the world's attention like a thread of golden silk. Because in the end, Nefertiti's legacy wasn't carved into the walls of a tomb or sealed beneath a golden mask. Her true monument was something far more enduring: curiosity, a perfect mystery, a life half seen, half erased, and wholly unforgettable. Perhaps that was her final act of power, not just to rule an empire, not just to shape belief or raise royal daughters, but to become timeless. Nefertiti, the beautiful one who has come, never truly left. She remains here, in our questions, in our wonder, in our collective memory of the women history tried to forget. She does not live in gold. She lives in the eternal act of being searched for. And what is more immortal than that? Now, we leave the desert behind, the dust of kings, the temples of gods, and we travel east, to a land where clouds hang low over green ridges, where the wind hums softly through ancient bamboo groves, and where a dragon sleeps. But not a myth, not a beast of flame or wings. This dragon is made of earth, of stone, of water, carved not by legend, but by centuries of calloused hands and quiet vision. These are the Longji rice terraces, known to those who live here as the dragon's backbone. From a distance, they ripple across the mountains like scales, curved, rhythmic, shimmering with water, rice, and ancestral pride. But step closer, and you'll find something even more alive. Water whispers through narrow channels, seedlings tremble in the breeze, and at dawn, mist rises gently from the soil, like the dragon breathing in its sleep. These terraces weren't built quickly. They weren't imposed. They were persuaded. Over 700 years ago, the Zhuang and Yao peoples looked up at steep, unforgiving hillsides and didn't see obstacles. They saw opportunity. There was no flat land, no heavy tools, no modern machines, just hands, stone, and time. They asked a single question: how do we feed ourselves here? The answer came not in decades, but in generations, inch by inch, step by step, layer by patient layer. Too steep, and the water would rush away. Too flat, and it would settle, stagnate, and rot. So the people of Longji didn't measure with rulers. They measured with time, with instinct, with the knowledge of generations passed down like heirlooms. Children learned by watching their elders. Elders watched the mountain. And slowly, over centuries, the mountain responded, not with surrender, but with trust. The result is a landscape that seems to defy nature, yet does so by flowing with it. From the base of the valley to the mist-kissed peaks, these terraces rise in gentle spirals, like a staircase sculpted for clouds. They mirror the mountain's curves with such elegance that one might believe the earth grew them on its own. But no, these forms are not natural. They are human. No engines, no blueprints, no concrete, only hands, only stones, only the belief that even the steepest land can be persuaded to nourish life. And still, they endure. The terraces are farmed, they are repaired, they are honored. No bulldozers arrive, no shortcuts are taken. Because the old ways proved something rare, that when tradition is rooted deep enough, it can outlast any storm. If the dragon's backbone is made of stone and earth, then water is its blood. It flows silently. No pumps, no machines, just gravity, ancient channels, and the careful hands of those who listen. At the top of the range, rainwater and natural springs are caught in narrow trenches, guided into the first terrace. From there, the water descends, level by level, life by life. Each field receives its share, no more, no less. There are no digital sensors, no metal valves, only gates of wood and stone, opened and closed by muscle memory and intuition. Too much flow, and one terrace floods. Too little, and the one below withers. So the villagers walk the ridges, every day, quietly, checking, adjusting, listening. Listening not to machines, but to the language of water. It's not so much farming as it is music. One wrong note, and the harmony is lost. But water does more than feed rice. It reflects. In spring, when the terraces are flooded, they turn to mirrors. Clouds drift across their surfaces. Sunlight dances in patterns. And at night, the stars themselves gaze down and see themselves reflected. Visitors call it surreal, and it is. The mountain becomes a living mirror, a vision of heaven stitched to the earth. Then comes summer. The water thickens with stalks of rice. The mirror fades, replaced by movement. Green waves ripple in the wind, like a sea of emeralds sighing across the slopes. Autumn turns it all gold. The grains shimmer, the dragon glows. And in winter, when the work pauses, the terraces rest beneath snow and frost. The dragon sleeps, but the veins remain, quiet, waiting. Because here, time moves differently, not by hours or minutes, but by moisture, by the first trickle of mountain thaw, by the croak of returning frogs, by the scent of wet soil awakening. In a world that counts seconds, the people of Longji still count seasons and drops. And so the dragon lives, not in flight, not in fire, but in the soft rhythm of water flowing through stone, in the quiet pulse of patience and persistence. A living masterpiece, shaped by hands that understood not how to conquer the mountain, but how to listen to it. Spring in the Longji Mountains begins not with blossoms, but with water. Snow melts on the higher peaks, streams whisper downward, and the terraces, still and mirrored, wake with purpose. The dragon stirs, and the people prepare for the ritual that binds them to every generation before. There are no trumpets, no declarations, only the sound of bare feet on narrow ridges and the soft slosh of water touching mud. Farmers, young and old, rise with the mist. Straw hats pulled low, baskets strapped to weathered backs. The air is thick with wet earth and mountain wind. This is not the season for machines. It never was. Each rice seedling, grown in raised nursery beds, is transplanted by hand, one by one, row by row. They step into the cold water, ankle deep, and press the slender stalks into the mud with practiced tenderness. Backbend, arm out, hand press, repeat, all day, sometimes for weeks. Children follow, splashing softly, mimicking the movements of their elders. They learn not by words, but by water, by mud, by feel. Knowledge here is not spoken, it is lived. Planting is labor, yes, but it is also ceremony. Offerings are made to the mountain spirits. Songs echo through the valleys. In some villages, the oldest among them scatter the first seedlings as a blessing. Each field planted is a promise to the land, to the ancestors, to the unborn children who will one day walk these same ridges. There is no rush. No one races the mountain. No one hurries the dragon. The rhythm is unhurried, meditative, a slow dance of hand and earth, of memory and muscle. And then, as days pass, green shoots rise from the flooded fields like whispers. From that moment forward, the terraces will grow, not just rice, but hope. Each seed is a prayer, each row a quiet defiance against hunger and haste. And so the cycle begins again, not with noise or fire, but with hands in mud and hearts in the sky. Scattered along the dragon's spine are its heartbeats, villages like Ping'an, Dazai, and Jingkeng. These are not tourist towns. They are living museums of memory. Each wooden house clings to the mountain like a lantern set afloat on waves of green. Built on stilts to withstand rain and steepness, their rooftops mirror the terraces they watch over, sloped, dark, quietly dignified. Inside, life is simple, warm, deeply communal. Families span generations under one roof. Rice wine simmers on wood fires. The scent of bamboo smoke drifts into the mist. Here live the Zhuang and Red Yao peoples, ethnic minorities with languages, customs, and stories all their own. You'll know the Red Yao women instantly. Their hair, never cut since childhood, is coiled like black crowns atop their heads. Sometimes they let it fall like silk as they bathe in the river, a sight so graceful it borders on myth. And though modernity climbs the trails, electric wires, cell towers, backpacks, and sneakers, the traditions hold. Indigo-dyed clothes, woven by hand, wooden looms creaking in quiet corners, reed pipes and bronze drums played during weddings and harvests. Hospitality here isn't rehearsed. It's instinct. Guests are offered mountain tea, rice wine from carved gourds, and stories passed down from elders who remember when the only light was fire. They speak of dragons in the fog, of ancestors who carved the hills, of spirits who guard the rice. And though visitors now arrive from every corner of the world, the village rhythm persists. The rice still grows, the music still plays, the dragon still breathes, not by resisting change, but by absorbing it slowly, like water, descending one level at a time. Here, within the dragon's coils, life does not rush. It flows, it echoes, it remembers. To walk these terraces is to walk through layers of story. The hills are not just earth. They are alive with legend. Whispers float through bamboo groves. Tales ride the wind. The mountains are not simply land. They are sacred beings. And the most enduring story? That of a sleeping dragon whose body stretches across the ridges. Its spine curls skyward, the very terraces themselves. When morning mist drapes the fields, locals say the dragon stirs. It breathes. It waits. Another tale says the terraces were a gift from the heavens, a divine generosity still unfolding in green. In a time of famine, the ancestors climbed the mountain and prayed. They cried out to the heavens for mercy, and the gods, moved by their devotion, sent rain. And with it, a message: carve the hills into steps, and rice will grow. So they obeyed, and the dragon came to guide their hands. Since then, the people have honored the mountain. They never shout in the fields. They never cut a tree without a prayer. These beliefs aren't written in books. They live in the soil, in songs sung during planting, in the incense offered before the first rains, in the silence kept during misted mornings. Children hear these tales not as stories, but as truth. Truth rooted in mud and memory. To laugh at the dragon is to invite a poor harvest. To disrespect the spirits is to risk flood or drought. Even the water holds life. Before it's released into the terraces, some farmers still pause. A few drops of rice wine, a quiet prayer. Not for performance, but because tradition, here, is as natural as tying one's shoes. And whether you believe in dragons or not, there is something sacred in the air. Maybe it's the stillness, maybe it's the clouds, or maybe it's the sense that this place is not just a feat of labor, but a living story, written not in ink, but in stone, in water, in rice. For centuries, the dragon's backbone remained a secret, remote, quiet, known only to those who called it home. But no place, no matter how sacred, remains untouched forever. The road came, then the wires. Tourists followed. Cameras, smartphones, hashtags, and the terraces, ancient, weathered, faced a question they had never known before. How do you survive the modern world? At first, there was fear. Would the mountains be sold? Would concrete replace wood? Would culture become costume? But the people of Longji didn't break. They adapted, not by discarding the past, but by weaving the present into it, one careful thread at a time. They opened homes, not as hotels, but as family stays. Visitors eat meals grown nearby, sticky rice steamed in bamboo, wild greens picked that morning. They sleep in wooden stilt houses where roosters still announce the sun. Nothing is curated. Nothing is manufactured. It's lived, honest, real. And the farming? It continues, season after season. The terraces are still flooded by hand, still planted row by row, still harvested with sickles worn smooth by time. Children go to school, but they still splash through the paddies at dusk. Tourism may bring money, but rice brings life. One supports the other. Both matter. Some youth leave for the cities, but many return, because there's something magnetic here, something deeper than nostalgia. Maybe it's the sound of water through the stone. Maybe it's the starlight on a rice field. Maybe it's the way the mountain teaches patience without saying a word. Yes, the festivals are louder now. Microphones have replaced drums. Signs are written in Mandarin and English. But the rituals? They remain. Offerings are made. Songs are sung. Elders still lead the prayers. The dragon's backbone didn't resist change. It absorbed it, gracefully. It breathes with time. It flexes. It bends. But it never breaks. And in a world that trades tradition for speed, Longji stands as quiet proof that progress can move gently, that the old ways still matter, especially when they are this beautiful. The dragon's backbone is never the same place twice. With each season, it sheds its skin, changes its rhythm, shifts its tone. While cities evolve over decades, these mountains transform in weeks, covered in light, wrapped in reflection. To witness them through a full year is to watch a mountain breathe. Spring arrives like a mirror. The terraces are flooded, ready for planting. The still water reflects the sky. Silver glass below your feet. Clouds float past, above and below. People speak of walking through heaven. The fields look empty, but they're full of potential. Beneath the surface, life is stirring. Then summer comes, and with it, a wave of green. Rice shoots stretch skyward, blanketing the terraces in shades of emerald. From a distance, the mountain seems to wear velvet, ribbons of green rippling in the breeze. The air is warm, heavy with water and sound. Frogs call from the paddies, and farmers, knee-deep in jade, work from dawn until dusk. Their hats bob above the rice like small sails on a sea of green. Then comes autumn, and the mountain turns to gold. The harvest begins. The terraces ignite in sunlight, each field glowing with grain, rippling like golden silk in the wind. Drums echo. Families gather. Sticky rice steams in wooden baskets. Songs rise through the hills. This is more than a season. It is a celebration. The dragon, fully awake, offers its bounty. Then, winter. Stillness returns. The water drains. The fields empty. Snow dusts the steps like sugar. Frost clings to the walls like fine lace. There are no tools in the fields, no footsteps, only silence. The dragon sleeps. But even in rest, it waits. Each season writes a different poem. Spring reflects. Summer grows. Autumn feeds. Winter rests. The beauty of Longji is not just in its shape, but in its cycle, in the way it accepts time without resistance, in how it changes quietly, never needing to announce itself. Photographers come here chasing the light, trying to capture something eternal. But the terraces don't freeze for anyone. They move, they breathe, they teach. That beauty is not static. It's rhythm. It's care. It's a promise renewed with every season. And so the dragon turns again, not with roar or flame, but with water, grain, and wind. In the end, the terraces are more than just fields. They are a vow, curved, quiet, etched into the mountain by devotion. A promise passed hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation. The dragon's backbone is not merely an agricultural marvel or an engineering wonder. It is a story of what happens when humans choose to live with the land, not against it. There were easier paths. The ancestors of Longji could have gone to the valleys. They could have chased flatter ground, but they stayed. They listened to stone. They studied the slope. They followed the water. And in doing so, they made the impossible ordinary. Feeding villages on a mountainside, every curve holds a lesson. Not just about rice, but about patience, legacy, care. These terraces weren't built in years or even decades. They took centuries. There is no shortcut to harmony. No machine can replicate the knowledge pressed into every stone by calloused hands and quiet persistence. And yet, they are not relics. They live. They bend with the rain. They shift with the needs of the people. They breathe with the shape of the world. That's their secret. They were never rigid. They were always fluid. Even now, as cell signals climb the mountains and screens glow in wooden homes, the terraces endure. They change, but they do not vanish. Because their roots are not just in soil, they are in story, in ritual, in the simple, sacred act of pressing one seed into 1 inch of earth and trusting the sky. To walk the dragon's backbone is to witness a contract, a pact between human and mountain, signed with sweat and sun and silence, a reminder that progress doesn't always mean speed, and that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it murmurs, like a stream slipping gently over stone. And perhaps that's why the terraces speak to so many, farmers, travelers, dreamers, because they remind us of something we've nearly forgotten, that the most lasting things in this world are not built with force, but with rhythm, humility, and time. The dragon sleeps, the people endure, and the mountain remembers. Now we leave the mist behind, the ridges, the mirrored fields, and follow a different kind of mystery. Most visitors to Giza lift their eyes to the sky, drawn to the towering silhouettes of the pyramids and the quiet gaze of the great Sphinx. But few ask, what lies beneath? Under the sand, under the Nile, under centuries of forgotten breath, a strange tale stirs. Most visitors to Giza lift their gaze skyward, toward the pyramids, toward the watchful eyes of the great Sphinx. Few ever wonder what lies beneath the sand, beneath the Nile, beneath centuries of forgotten floods and drifting sediment. Not far from the ancient village of Abu Rawash, in the quiet shallows just beyond the tourist trails, a strange rumor lingers. It speaks of something massive, eroded, ignored, a shape hidden in brackish water, half lost in the reeds, an underwater sphinx. For generations, local fishermen have whispered about it. They speak of stone curves emerging during rare droughts, grooves worn nearly smooth, yet undeniably shaped by human hands. There are no signs, no velvet ropes, no postcards or tour buses waiting nearby, just reeds, silence, and something that doesn't quite fit the landscape. Those who've been there, divers, explorers, independent researchers, say the land feels strange, charged, as if memory itself clings to the stone. Beneath the murk, sonar has picked up geometric patterns, lines too precise to be accidental, blocks placed with intent. But what stirs the imagination is not just the shape, it's the age. Some claim this figure predates the pyramids, not by decades, but by millennia. If true, it would fracture the foundation of Egyptian chronology. The conventional story holds that the Great Sphinx was carved around 2500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafra. But this submerged form may come from a time when the Sahara was green and the Nile ran wild through a landscape lush and unknown. Skeptics say it's a fantasy, a rock eroded by water and wishful thinking, limestone shaped by centuries of floods, not chisel and vision, but the grooves, the symmetry, the uncanny alignment with celestial markers. They raise more questions than they answer. The site remains untouched. No official excavation, no peer-reviewed papers, no permits, just silence. Perhaps it's nothing. just another shape in the mud, a trick of time and sediment. Or perhaps it's everything. A relic not just of Egypt's past, but of a world lost to flood and myth. For now, the so-called underwater Sphinx lies still, not sleeping, waiting. And if it could speak, what stories might it tell? And why, one wonders, do so many seem determined not to listen? The legend of the submerged Sphinx moved from local whispers to global curiosity in the 1980s. That's when independent divers and fringe researchers began publishing strange reports, grainy photos, faint sonar images, stories of a lion-bodied monument hidden beneath layers of mud and silence. Most were dismissed, but curiosity, once stirred, rarely settles. And more dangerously, they planted doubt. One of the earliest proponents was an amateur Egyptologist who claimed to have seen a weathered monument emerge briefly during a particularly dry season. According to him, this was no misidentified rock. It had geometry, symmetry, the outline of a face, softened by water but still there. Naturally, this challenged everything. Egyptology, as a discipline, rests on structure, on timeline. The pyramids and Great Sphinx of Giza are tied to Pharaoh Khafra, the Old Kingdom, and a well-anchored chronology. An older Sphinx, one hidden beneath the Nile, that would rewrite not just Egypt's past, but our understanding of civilization itself. Mainstream scholars were cautious, even dismissive. Without carbon dating, stratigraphic studies, or an official dig, there was nothing to validate the claim. After all, limestone weathers in strange ways. Wind, rain, and river are ancient sculptors. In Egypt, nature often imitates intention. But the photos kept circulating. The sonar scans continued. The patterns they revealed, too smooth, too symmetrical, too intentional. And then came the theorists. No museum ever claimed it. No plaque was raised. No excavation marked the spot. And so, the Sphinx, if that's truly what it is, remains where it always has been, buried in silt, cradled in secrecy, caught between myth and mud. The idea that something near Giza might predate the pyramids isn't just provocative, it's revolutionary. If the so-called underwater Sphinx is more than erosion, more than coincidence, then Egypt's story didn't begin with the Fourth Dynasty. It began before names, before papyrus, before even the desert was dry, back when the Sahara was a green savanna and the Nile meandered wildly through a lush, fertile plain. This theory gained traction in the 1990s when Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist, studied the Great Sphinx itself. He made a startling claim that the deep vertical fissures on the Sphinx's enclosure wall were not caused by wind and sand, but by rain. Heavy, sustained, ancient rainfall. Rain that hasn't touched the Giza Plateau since at least 7,000 BCE. That single idea, that the original Sphinx could be thousands of years older than believed, pushed Egypt's story back beyond the pharaohs, into prehistory. And if water shaped the Sphinx, could it also have hidden an even older sibling? The underwater Sphinx sits in a lower region, closer to ancient floodplains. Satellite images and ground-penetrating radar reveal strange alignments, rectangles, foundations, symmetrical outlines, all buried beneath seasonal water and thick silt. These are not accidents. They hint at intention, at age, at origin. Supporters of the theory point to Egypt's missing chapters, the gap between the end of the Ice Age and the rise of the first dynasties, a time when the Nile shifted, when the Sahara dried, when entire cultures may have risen, flourished, and vanished, with no papyrus to mark their passing. The idea that pre-literate, pre-pharaonic people could have shaped a monument of this scale strains traditional views. But is it really so impossible? After all, Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey was built around 9,600 BCE by hunter-gatherers. Massive stone pillars, carved animals, a site older than Stonehenge by thousands of years. If they could do it, why not here? Could Egypt hold a similar secret? A lost people, long before Narmer, who marked the land with stone before they ever marked it with writing? If so, the underwater Sphinx wouldn't just be a ruin. It would be evidence of an erased age, a time that may have whispered to the builders of Giza, leaving behind not only myth, but memory. A monument not destroyed, but drowned. Stone does not lie. It remembers. And around the submerged basin near Abu Rawash, it speaks in patterns, in grooves, in erosion, in a quiet insistence that time is older than we think. Geologists who examined the site noted peculiar weathering, rounded curves, smooth channels, flow lines, not shaped by wind, not shaped by sand, but by water, by movement, by rainfall, forces absent from this region for thousands of years. And this is familiar. The same arguments were made about the Great Sphinx's enclosure wall, the vertical fissures that mimic not desert erosion, but rainfall. Now, at the underwater site, we see that same signature, only this time hidden beneath a shallow flood basin. During rare droughts, parts of the formation rise into view. Lion-like shoulders, a hunch of stone, and a base so level it feels too precise to be natural. Researchers note the clay-rich basin is geologically active, with signs of ancient water tables rising and falling violently across the millennia. The stone there is heavily worn, but not chaotically. The wear follows the shape, lines that suggest deliberate carving, and later, submersion. A sculpture made by hands and hidden by floods. Some sediment layers around the supposed site date back to the early Holocene, a time when Egypt was wetter, greener, and prone to massive seasonal floods. If a monument had been carved then, it could have stood for centuries before being swallowed by rising water, forgotten by shifting populations, and buried beneath the Nile's wandering silt. Skeptics argue it's all coincidence, natural formations dressed in myth, hopeful eyes finding meaning in chaos. But water doesn't form symmetry. It doesn't chisel aligned foundations. It doesn't carve what appears, even faintly, to be a pore on weathered stone. So the question deepens. If water could erase a monument from view, what else has it taken with it? And more urgently, how much of history still lies hidden beneath the surface? If the underwater Sphinx is truly there, silent, carved, and ancient, why hasn't it been excavated? Why does it remain beneath layers of mud and silence? Overlooked by archaeologists, ignored by institutions, left to the current and the reeds. The answer, like the artifact itself, lies just beneath the surface. Egypt's archaeological authorities are, understandably, protective. With a legacy this old, this sacred, excavation is never casual. It requires permits, funding, international oversight, and most of all, official consensus. And that consensus is built on an unspoken rule: do not rewrite Egypt's history, unless your evidence is undeniable. And that's the problem. The so-called underwater Sphinx has never received a formal, state-sanctioned excavation. Independent researchers have studied the area. Foreign academics have surveyed it. But without institutional support, their findings remain anecdotal, suggestive, not conclusive. There's also the challenge of the Nile itself. It isn't a fixed feature. It floods, it recedes, it wanders. The alleged site is flood-prone, often submerged for much of the year. Excavation would require draining the area, rerouting water, protecting fragile ecosystems, and managing the strain of centuries of sediment pressure. A project not of months, but of decades. And then, there are the political realities. A discovery of this scale, if confirmed, would disrupt more than just textbooks. It could challenge the foundational timeline that Egypt presents to the world. It could unbalance national pride, and it would almost certainly ignite a media frenzy that few governments welcome. The Ministry of Antiquities tends to support discoveries that reinforce Egypt's greatness, not those that question its origins. Some whisper that preliminary studies have already been done, quietly, privately, but without official records, peer-reviewed publications, or a press conference. These claims drift, like the artifact itself, into conspiracy, and so the monument remains, buried. Whether by nature, by policy, or by intent, it sleeps under mud and skepticism, and that is its strange irony, that in a land so obsessed with preserving its ancient past, one of its greatest mysteries may lie in plain sight, unclaimed, unstudied, untouched by time's official record. But nothing stays buried forever. To the ancient Egyptians, the Sphinx was never just a statue. It was symbol, guardian, god, mystery. With the body of a lion and the head of a man, the Sphinx fused strength with wisdom, animal might tamed by human mind. A sentinel at the edge of the mortal world, where the divine meets the dust. The most famous, of course, is the Great Sphinx of Giza. Towering 66 feet high, it has guarded the plateau for over 4,000 years, facing east, watching the sun rise and fall on the tombs of kings. Its exact origin remains unclear. Most say it was built by Khafra. Others believe it is far older, its face perhaps recarved, its body predating even the pyramids beside it. But what would it mean if there was another? A second Sphinx, water-worn, hidden, older, just miles away. It would change everything. No known Egyptian text mentions twin sphinxes at Giza. The records are silent. But in later Greco-Roman traditions, there are echoes of guardians placed in balance, flanking sacred spaces. And in Egyptian design, symmetry is sacred. Twin statues, twin obelisks, twin lion avenues. Why not twin sphinxes? Some researchers suggest that this so-called underwater sphinx is not a copy, not a later echo, but the original, a prototype, a pre-dynastic vision later resurrected, refined and scaled by the hands of dynastic kings. If true, then the concept of the Sphinx, guardian, watcher, symbol, didn't originate in the Fourth Dynasty. It came from somewhere older, from a forgotten culture whose myths floated forward, carried on memory like silt on the Nile. And if the monument predates writing, it may not be bound by the ideology of the pharaohs at all. Its purpose, astronomical perhaps, ritualistic, commemorative. Maybe it marked a flood, a season, or a god whose name never reached a scroll. The lion form was no accident. In ancient Egypt, lions symbolized the horizon, the place where the sun rose and fell. A sphinx facing east was more than decoration. It was eternity, carved into stone. To carve one was to capture the rebirth of light. Now imagine one carved long before the pyramids, before history as we know it, waiting, watching. It would not just rewrite history, it would redefine it. Egypt, not as the start of civilization, but as its echo, its inheritor, its remembrance. And if such a symbol sleeps beneath water, what could be more fitting for a guardian of forgotten worlds? As whispers of the underwater sphinx spread, a quiet divide has opened. Not in stone, but in thought. On one side, traditional Egyptology, structured, cautious, demanding consensus and rigorous proof. On the other, independent researchers, alternative historians, engineers, and thinkers who believe something extraordinary is being overlooked. Mainstream scholars demand evidence, radiocarbon dates, inscriptions, stratigraphy, peer-reviewed papers. And they're not wrong. Egypt is full of stones shaped by wind, by water, by time. Nature can trick the eye. And the past, once broken by careless hands or media storms, cannot be put back together. Archaeology must tread gently, but others argue that caution has become silence, that curiosity has been replaced by fear. Independent researchers point to high-resolution imagery, to LiDAR scans revealing geometric patterns, to erosion that flows like design, not chaos. And they question why something that could change everything is left untouched. Tourism thrives on stories already told. A new sphinx, especially one that challenges the timeline, could threaten the comfort of the known. Some whisper that behind closed doors, explorations have begun quietly. But without records, without data, it drifts into speculation. And so the monument remains, buried, silent, not forgotten, but unacknowledged. In a land that guards its past so fiercely, it's a strange paradox that one of its greatest mysteries may lie in plain sight, not hidden by nature, but by narrative. To the ancients, the Sphinx was more than stone. It was symbol, part lion, part mind, part threshold, a cosmic sentinel where the divine and the mortal met. And if a second Sphinx exists, older, submerged, unknown, it would shake everything. There are no ancient texts that speak of twin sphinxes at Giza, but symmetry is sacred in Egypt. Twin obelisks, twin avenues, twin guardians. Why not twin sphinxes? Maybe this one, the underwater one, is the original, not a rival, but a seed. Its silence is what gives it power. Its invisibility is what makes it dangerous. And today, this monument, real or not, has become something more. A mirror. For one side, a relic of pseudoscience. For the other, a glimpse into a past long buried. The divide is no longer academic. It's emotional, philosophical. It speaks to how we approach the past. Do we only trust what has been proven, or do we allow ourselves to follow the whispers? The underwater Sphinx forces the question. It's not just a rock, not just a relic. It's a litmus test for how curious we are allowed to be. And so long as it remains buried, both sides will argue above it. A monument that says nothing, yet might change everything. There's something haunting about a mystery buried in plain sight, especially when it wears the face of a lion and stares from beneath the water with ancient silence. The so-called underwater Sphinx may be real or illusion, but its pull is undeniable. It stirs something deep inside us, not just the desire to discover, but the aching need to remember. Because beneath the stones, beneath the sand, beneath the story, lies something older than archaeology, the human sense of loss. We've always lived beside ruins. Cities fall, languages fade, civilizations vanish beneath waves, beneath sand, beneath ash. And still, we look back, not just for answers, but for identity. Who were we? How far back do our stories stretch? And what have we forgotten in our restless march toward progress? If the underwater Sphinx is real, if it was carved by hands before history learned to write, then it is more than a monument. It's a voice from a chapter we never knew existed, a remnant from an age when people may have seen the stars differently, honored the earth more deeply, or carried mythologies now lost to dust. Some say it belongs to an advanced prehistoric culture, wiped out by flood or fire, a theory the mainstream often labels as fringe. But regardless of its truth, the emotion remains. To imagine a monument sculpted before the pyramids, then submerged, forgotten, and erased, is to confront how fragile civilization truly is. And maybe that's why the story persists, because it reminds us that time is not a straight road, but a spiral, that even stone can vanish if the river flows long enough. But most importantly, it reminds us that discovery is not over. The Earth still holds secrets not found in search engines or textbooks. In an age defined by instant answers, the underwater sphinx is something rare, an unanswered question, a possibility, a mystery not yet tamed by drones, data, or algorithms. And whether it's natural rock or a forgotten monument, it has value, because it makes us wonder. Wonder if the past is deeper than we thought. Wonder if myths carry memory. Wonder what lies just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to listen. The underwater Sphinx of Giza, whether carved or accidental, confirmed or dismissed, remains exactly where it has always been. Beneath the surface, beneath the mud, the water, the weight of time, no plaque, no name, no spotlight, just a quiet presence that speaks softly in the absence of answers. For every monument we've unearthed in Egypt, there are others, too delicate, too remote, too dangerous to disturb. And a few, like this one, sit in plain view. Not because they lack importance, but because they ask questions we may not be ready to answer. Maybe that's the true power of the underwater Sphinx. Not its size, not its age, but its silence. It forces us to confront the limits of what we know and the discomfort of what we've overlooked. In truth, it may never be excavated. Politics, funding, tradition. These are walls taller than any tomb, but that doesn't make it irrelevant. Quite the opposite. Its very obscurity has made it a mirror, reflecting not just what's buried in the earth, but what we choose to remember, and what we choose to forget. Because history isn't a closed book, it's a living puzzle, scattered across landscapes and shorelines, waiting for a shift in the tide, a change in thinking, or a single brave question to stir the dust. Maybe one day the water will recede. Maybe we'll see its full form, face, pause, gaze, rising once again. Maybe radar will confirm what legend has whispered all along. Or maybe it will remain a mystery, passed from voice to voice, like a story told between stones. But whether it's monument or mirage, the underwater Sphinx has already fulfilled its greatest purpose. It makes us imagine. And in a world suffocating in certainty, that may be its greatest gift. Because perhaps the most ancient things in the world are not just buried in time, but in us, in our need to explore, to remember, and to believe that somewhere, beneath the waves or the desert, the past still breathes and still waits to be found.